Hello and welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana. Today, we are diving into a topic that hits close to home for, I guess, all of us: time management and life balance. If you have ever found yourself juggling a million things, feeling burned out, frustrated, wondering how on earth to make time for what really matters to you, well, you are in for a treat, listeners. And joining us in this conversation is Cindy Baker, a powerhouse speaker, coach, and founder of CBC, Cindy Baker Coaching. Listeners, Cindy is a master at helping entrepreneurs, especially those with ADHD, transform chaos into clarity, turning overwhelm into action. With her focused sprint method and other ADHD friendly strategies, she has helped countless people overcome procrastination, manage their time, and even grow their businesses without losing their sanity. Fueled by faith and coffee, Cindy is here to share her secrets on how to get more done with less stress, all while living a life that feels balanced and fulfilling. So, everyone, get ready to take some notes and maybe even laugh a little because Cindy's story of turning scroll breaks into success breaks is nothing short of inspiring for us. So, let's quickly jump in. Cindy, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute honor to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Um, so, Cindy, you talk about managing focus instead of time. So, can you share how that shift personally transformed your approach to productivity?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that they just need more hours in the day, but that isn't the case. We really just need to manage our focus instead. And so you mentioned the sprint method. I started to shift my focus where I would break my day up into like 60 or 90-minute focused sprints, powerful sprints, and I would set a timer and just focus on one thing. I said no scrolling, no multitasking, and then what I found is that I was getting more done in a few focused hours than I used to in a whole day. So you put aside all the distractions and you put your best energy towards what matters the most. So I think a lot of times we end up, like you said, distracted, scrolling on the phone. And we say we're just going to check it for a few minutes, and it turns into 30 minutes and things like that. So thinking in terms of energy and focus instead of time is just a slight shift, but it makes a big difference.
What interesting, Cindy. Also, when we talk with respect to entrepreneurs, professionals, they push themselves to exhaustion. So, what's your advice for recognizing the early signs of burnout? Uh, you know, because entrepreneurs uh, they can't avoid to multitask. So, what are the steps to recognize the early signs of burnout and take proactive steps to prevent it?
Yeah, it is preventable. I think that because entrepreneurs have to set their own structure, a lot of times they're working from home, and so they don't have good boundaries, and they end up trying to do everything, and so they're not effective at anything because they're spread too thin. So when you find yourself becoming irritable, relationships are being affected. When you find yourself working all the time but not really being productive, not meeting your revenue goals in your business, your health is suffering, you're tired. Those are some signs of burnout. And when it's not fun anymore, it's not going to be fun all the time. There's a lot of things that I have to do to run my business that I don't particularly enjoy. But for the most part, I enjoy helping people. And whenever that goes away and I start to resent it, then I would realize, wow, I'm getting burned out, So as far as preventing it, a lot of that goes back to understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. And so if you don't have a big driving why, then you lose focus. Excuse me. So um, for instance, your values have to line up with how you spend your time. So for instance, if you say you're interested in being physically healthy, that's one of the things you value. But then on your calendar, there's never any room for exercise or sleep or other things that contribute to physical health, then you're not in alignment and you're going to feel frustrated. And that goes with every category. So understanding what's important to you and why you're doing what you're doing, and then going back to that all the time. I mean, the best thing you can give other people is a healthy you. And so you have to take care of yourself. Sorry, but someone get drink water.
Yeah, please, please, please take your time.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot more we could say about that, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. That you have to go back to what your values are, what's important to you, and that's different for everybody. But if you're not living in alignment with what you know is important to you, then you're going to feel frustrated and burned out.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So when we talk about your focused sprint method, of course, listeners will have maybe this question in their mind that, rigidly structuring your day somehow stifles creativity. So how do you balance structure with the flexibility to let that, motivation or inspiration flow naturally?
Yeah, that's a great question. um, because as entrepreneurs, we are creative. And a lot of times we think that structure is going to hurt our creativity. But actually, structure is freeing, because especially if you're the one in charge of the structure, if you are the one putting the structure in place, then um, it allows you to get things done so that you have the space and the mental space to be creative. And so a lot of time management gurus will talk about time blocking, and
Yep.
I've used time blocking, and that's helpful. But for some people who are very creative, it feels too constricting. And so I always talk about time chunking instead, which is more about uh, putting like things together and in those little sprints, getting them done, and then leaving some boundaries and some free space for being strategic and creative, um, so that you've got a little bit of wiggle room. If you schedule every waking moment back to back, then if one thing runs late, it's like a domino effect, and your whole day is thrown off. So you got to have those boundaries in there. Um, and then I even have advised clients to have a reset day every once in a while, which is a day that's not as scheduled, so that you can just sort of um, catch up on things and work on creative tasks when you feel like it that day. And sometimes that helps.
Mm,
I
That's
don't know if that makes sense.
That does, and I really love that concept, time chunking, because especially for creative people, it can be too restrictive to limit everything within those quick bursts of time, 15 minutes, the 20 minutes. It may hinder that creativity in their mind. So I think
Yeah.
that's very, very different and a smart approach. Also, now we have talked about why this should be, or what are the pros and cons. Can you walk us through your focused sprint method, Cindy, and how listeners can apply it into their daily lives to maximize productivity?
Yeah. Of course, I have a coaching program where I go into detail step by step, but just in a nutshell, instead of trying to manage your time, you want to pay attention to your energy levels and your focus instead. So, for instance, my best mental time to do things that require uh, deep concentration, that's in the morning for me. And so I would not want to schedule those things later in the day um, when I'm sleepy. So you have to pay attention to those rhythms because what some people will do is they'll take a giant to-do list and everything looks equal, in importance. And they'll sit down and they're like, oh, I've got so much to do. And so the first thing they do is the easiest thing on the list, which is usually not the most important. So when you're doing the sprint method, usually the night before, the day before, you plan the next day. And I tell my clients to pick the top 3 most important things that they need to get done that day. There's going to be way more than 3, but you pick 3, and those 3 are your non-negotiables. At the end of the day, if you don't do those 3, you're going to feel really bad or there's going to be negative consequences. And so you schedule the most important and the most urgent things when your energy is at its peak, when you're the most mentally focused, instead of wasting that time checking emails and making graphics in Canva and things like that. You actually tackle the more difficult things because those are the things that are going to move the needle in your business. Your top 3 things should be revenue producing activities. And if it's a big project and it looks overwhelming and it's hard to get started, because getting started is the hardest part sometimes, then I encourage people to break the project up into little mini steps and then just get started. Like, what's the next right thing in front of me to do that'll move me towards this goal? And sometimes if you're not motivated, it has to be very small. Like, if I'm writing a book right now, no one's making me write this book. And so I have to discipline myself to do it. And sometimes I'll just say, okay, I'm just going to go sit in the chair in front of my computer. I can do that, right? So I break it down that small, and then I'm going to turn on the computer. Then I'm going to pull up the document, and I'm going to read the last sentence where I left off. Those type of things until finally that momentum kicks in and your brain starts going. But sometimes you have to break up things into small steps so it doesn't feel so overwhelming and intimidating. But those 3 things, that's the most important. And there's a lot more I could say about that, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. You set a timer. I have ADHD, so my brain wanders very easily, and so if I have a timer, it instills that sense of urgency, especially if it's a timer where I can see how much time has passed and how much is left, like an analog clock or a kitchen timer that winds down, because then I can see it and I'm like, oh, I've only got 10 more minutes, as opposed to just looking at your phone and you see that moment in time that doesn't really help you see actual hours and minutes. So that helps.
And sometimes what personally for me, what helps me is, let's say if I have, let's say, an episode or a meeting or something, let's say at a fixed time, then I'll just set up an alarm clock 5 or maybe 10 minutes before that, just to give me a kind of a warning to my mind that yes, now 10 minutes or 5 minutes are left. Finish up your existing work and then jump onto the meeting or get prepared for it. So that it works for me somehow.
Mhm. Yeah, the timers are great and reminders because Our brains are reactive. And
Hmm.
so when that timer goes off, it grabs your attention, you know, and it
Absolutely.
keeps you from forgetting
Also,
that.
Cindy, as you mentioned, that you have ADHD. So, as someone with ADHD, how do you leverage your brain's unique traits as strengths, rather than what people see as challenges?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's one of the things that I teach in my coaching is so many people look at their challenges and that's it. And they try to work on their weaknesses. But it's important to understand what your strengths are. And there are a lot of things about ADHD that can actually be beneficial in business. In fact, I read a statistic somewhere that over 60% of entrepreneurs have ADHD. Now, I don't know if that's true or if that's really diagnosed or if they just have symptoms or what, but we like to we get bored easily, so we like to do a lot of different things, and that is helpful in being an entrepreneur. Usually we're creative and intelligent. That's helpful. So there are a lot of benefits. There's something called hyper focus, where we have the capacity when we're really engaged in something to just tune out everything else and kind of get lost in it. Um, and as long as that's channeled in the right way, that can be very beneficial, and we can end up getting more done than people without ADHD. Uh, so there's a lot of things. I do a whole presentation on um, traits that people think are weaknesses in ADHD and how we can flip them around and see them as a positive. So I think that's important because a lot of people have grown up um, over the years trying to compensate for their weaknesses and their self-esteem has suffered. Maybe they've heard criticism from parents, teachers, bosses. Uh, and so it's important to understand how your brain works and then, learning to work with it instead of fighting against it. For instance, if you know that there's a task that you're going to tend to get lost in and hyper focus, then maybe you save that for the end of the day so that you get your other things done first. Or maybe you schedule it first, but you set a timer so that it you know when to stop. But if you know those things about yourself, then you can work with it. So yeah.
Also, Cindy, so I am so there are I what I have seen in my corporate experience and interacting with people, there are two kinds of productivity. One is you become more productive in less amount of time. Those can be really street smart people or people those who know shortcuts to do the right amount of work, right output. And then there are people who take more time, but they wish to deliver their best. And I am the person who follows the second rule. I take a lot of time, but I do make sure that, whatever output I'm giving, at least no one can take or point out any mistakes from that. So, are both of the approaches fine as per the person is comfortable with, or any one of them is the better one? I mean, I sometimes, really find it very confusing and, I really feel very bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good question. There's not a simple answer because it depends on what needs to be done. And sometimes if you spend too much time on one thing, you aren't going to finish
Mm.
all the things that you need to have done. So I think that's where prioritizing comes in. And
Hmm.
so if there are some things that aren't that important or urgent, then maybe you can delegate them or automate them. Um, I have automations that send emails at certain times in my business, things like that.
Yeah.
You can also look at the things that you're um, spending too much time on and really evaluate, why are you trying to make it perfect? Is that more for your own, how you feel about it, or does it really need to be perfect? Because sometimes, and I have a mantra that my clients always tease me about. I always say done beats perfect, because when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you have to make money or you'll go under,
Mm.
And so, yeah, you have to sometimes be okay with just 90%. And if you're a perfectionist, you got to change that mindset to realize that no one but you is going to notice that the 10% is not perfect. And it would be better to go on and get it out into the world, um, and on time, as opposed to waiting for the perfect conditions or spending too much time, because probably no one's going to notice if
Yeah,
if
exactly.
your colors don't match exactly or things like that, so you have to decide. There's a balance there. Um, so it just depends.
I love your answer. Done beats perfection. This is
Mhm.
such a good quote, such a good takeaway for me, and I'm very sure for our listeners also who will resonate with my question. So before we wrap up, Cindy, for someone feeling overwhelmed, uh, what's that one small change you would like to suggest today they can make right now to feel more in control of their time and energy?
Uh, well, besides hiring me as a coach, um, I would say this is going to be not what you expect as an answer, but I think getting a good night's sleep. I think that when we go into the day tired, um, we have trouble making decisions. We forget things. We're not as creative. We're relationships suffer, that type of thing. So if you're talking about just making one small change, I would start there. I would start with prioritizing sleep, because when you try to make all the other changes and you're tired, they aren't going to work as well. So if you had to just pick one thing, I would start with that.
Very rightfully said, Cindy. Great, great. This was such an incredible conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your insights on managing focus, preventing burnout. We spoke on ADHD in entrepreneurship and also creating balance. These are so practical and empowering insights. So, if our listeners they wish to explore more about your focused sprint method and the coaching services you provide, how they can do that.
Yeah, they can visit my website. There's a contact form there. They can find me on social media and reach out there. I'll give you a link to a free course you can give your listeners on how they can beat procrastination. And when they opt in for that course, they'll get on my email list, and I send lots of helpful tips every week. And so that would be a good place to start.
Lovely, lovely. We'll have all the details mentioned in the show notes along with this episode. And Cindy, once again, thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, listeners, if Cindy's wisdom resonated with you, be sure to check out the show notes if you wish to connect with her and check out her services, her resources. And I loved Cindy's reminder that it's not about adding more hours to our day, as we talked in the initial part of the conversation. It's about making the most of the time and energy we have. So, thank you to everyone for tuning into the Mindful Living podcast. And if you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little extra balance and focus in their life. Until next time, this is your host, Sana, reminding you to take a deep breath. Take care of yourself and remember, you don't have to do it all to live a life you love. See you next time.